All right. I am here with Lindsay Pinchuk, and she is the founder and CEO at Lindsay Pinchuk Marketing, as well as the host and creator at Dear Founder. How's it going, Lindsay?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great.
Thanks
Doing
for having
great.
me.
Yeah, I'm excited to really get into your successes. But before we get there, let's talk about your background. What got you into business?
I always say I was kind of an accidental entrepreneur. I worked in advertising and marketing for 10 years at the Hearst Corporation and MTV and Sports Illustrated. I worked in advertising sales before digital, was even a thing. And I got pregnant. And when I got pregnant, I did not have any other friends who were pregnant. Meanwhile, we all have eighth graders. I was just first. And I said to my husband, there has to be something out there for me to meet other women who are going through pregnancy. It's such a isolating time and it's a very specific time and there are very specific needs for this market. And there wasn't. And so I started hosting events, like literally just like simple like workout events, shopping events, and through word of mouth and just spreading it with my own network and community, 50 people, 75 people, 100 people started coming to these events that I was hosting here in Chicago. And before I knew it, I had brands that were interested in being a part of what we were doing. And when I went on maternity leave, the goal was really to like official maternity leave. The goal was to come back and continue doing this on the side and continue working at Hearst. I loved my job. And when I was on maternity leave, I did do a lot of work on Bump Club. I had a really, my first daughter slept. My second daughter didn't. So there probably wouldn't have been a Bump Club had I started it when she was born. But I did a lot of work on my official maternity leave on Bump Club and really took it to the next level. And so when I went back to work, I ended up having a boss, a female boss who did not like the fact that I had a side hustle. She was a recent divorcee and did not have children of her own. And she was really nasty to me. And she said, if I find out that you're working on your business on my time, then there will be consequences. It was kind of maddening considering I ran like a $5 million territory for Good Housekeeping at the time. And I made the decision to leave. And that was really how it happened. I asked myself, what's the worst that could happen? And the worst that could happen was that we failed. And I went back and I got another job and I never looked back.
Nice. Very nice. I have found that the sort of disgruntled boss or the grumpy boss often leads to spin outs of some of the coolest companies that I've heard of, just because it's that chip on the shoulder enough to really push you into doing something full time, and that's really a fantastic story about the Bump Club. So how did it grow from side hustle to jumping full time? What was that time frame that it took to really scale it up? Did you hire people? What was that progression
Yeah,
like?
so I started it in March of 2010 was when I launched it. I was pregnant and um I had my daughter in October. I went back to work for like a minute in January and when I came back when I left and I started Bump Club on my own, I already was working with sponsors. I was already generating revenue. You have to remember this was a business. This is a business that it was a business that was a community. I mean, that's all it was. There was no product. The product was the events and the information and the education that we were providing, and the community was buying it. And so there really wasn't much overhead. I ended up hiring someone in the spring of 2011, so about a year into it. Really, she was like a gopher for me. I mean, honestly, like she was just like she did a lot of manual things for me, dropping off, picking up for events. We were an events-based company and I had a baby at home and my husband worked full time. So about a year in, I started getting out I started fielding requests from really big brands. Like Microsoft reached out to me then like the second summer that I had Bump Club, and they wanted me to host a big event for parents and parents to be in their store here in Oak Brook, Illinois. And that was a very big deal, and they paid me the most that I had ever been paid at that point by a sponsor. I think it was, I don't know, maybe $7,000 or $10,000. It was a lot of money. At the time, it felt like a lot of money. And so that was kind of like the first entree. And then as we started growing, a lot of the women who were coming to Bump Club were spreading the word to their friends, like, oh my God, we have this network and blah, blah, blah. And I had people reaching out to me from all different cities across the country. So I had a woman, Katie, who later became one of my long term employees, who came down from Minneapolis, met with me, and we expanded Bump Club to Minneapolis. I had a woman in Chicago who moved to Austin, and she was like, I can't live without Bump Club. We expanded it to Austin. And then we also expanded it to LA and San Francisco. And that was probably that was in like 2011, 2012. So like the second, third year. And during this time, a lot of brands were taking note, and they were taking note because I was reaching expectant parents, which is really hard to do. You have a 6-month window of when a person announces their pregnancy to the time they have a baby to really capture them as your customer. And I had them. And you have to remember, this was before social media, so it was a very different experience. I built this alongside social media. And then I had big brands that, like really big brands, that started taking note. And I will give kudos to Katie here because she was hosting events in Minneapolis, and Target came knocking on our door in 2012. And they really wanted us to host an experience in their store to help their guest experience with the registry process. And we started working with Target. And Target helped put Bump Club on the map in this incredible way because they were paying us and brands were paying us to be associated with these events. And we were able to go into markets over the country. At the same time, Nordstrom approached me. Same thing. They wanted us to bring expectant parents into their stores because they started carrying baby gear and they needed to let people know. And so we created a custom event activation. We did I think it was like 28 Nordstrom stores over the course of 18 months. Like I was spending my weekends in Nordstrom stores. It was crazy and amazing all at the same time. We had 400 people coming to these events. And we were doing our own events. So we had our own tour for like baby registry called Gearapalooza that went around the country. And so I would say by 2013 is when we hosted our first our actual Target event. It took about a year to get that up and running. And then late 2013, 2014 was when we launched our first Nordstrom event. Gearapalooza started in 2011. So that was kind of like our first big thing as well. So it was probably about 4 or 5 years before we were really like a national brand, but
Mm-hmm.
we were working with every single baby brand on the marketplace. And then with social media, all of a sudden making its entree onto the scene, we started providing a lot of digital content. And so we were able to reach parents and parents to be that weren't in the cities where we were. And it was
Mm-hmm.
also driving demand with our partners to host events in like smaller marketplaces. So it took, I would say, it was like a good 2-3 years. And I would say in year 3 or 4 was when we first started hitting that 7-figure mark.
Mm-hmm. And the revenue model, what was the structure? Was it like a percentage of sales the day of with some fees up front?
No, it
How
was
did it
the
work?
revenue structure was very much a media model. I came from a media background.
Uh-huh.
And so like the subscribers were our event tickets. So like think of like a magazine subscription. Like that was like our ticket sales. We charged people to come to these events
Got
anywhere
it.
from $50 to $150. I also had a VIP membership that generated, I would probably say, a good 10% of the revenue every single year. We had a few thousand people in that membership. And then it wasn't huge, to be honest. Like it was really in the markets where we did the most events, and the rest came from sponsors. And so I would say it was probably 70% sponsorships.
Got it.
So I mean,
Got it.
we were selling custom activations at our events, and eventually we were selling, digital advertising and digital programs as well.
Hmm. And this was really during the era of kind of a boom around mommy bloggers. I remember this era of blogging and like just the entree of social media, like you said, was really you don't mess with the mommy bloggers. Like whenever they want to purchase something, it's going to get sold out. In those early days, I remember seeing that, and as a dad of two, I've gone through those stages of like the baby gear, basically buying whatever is the sort of needed trendy kind of product at the time. So it is like a golden 6 months there to get somebody's attention. So I can see why the brands were willing to really just get get you guys as far and wide as possible across all these different stores. It's really
Well,
neat.
the interesting thing is that like I was not considered a blogger. Like we had a blog on our website, but I
Hmm.
wasn't a blogger. And so we actually worked with a lot of bloggers to enhance our own awareness and
Yeah.
we did a lot of events surrounding bloggers to bring them to our events and drive awareness of Bump Club. But the brands loved Bump Club because yes, we had a blog on our website and we shared a lot of information, but we were talking to these people in person. I mean,
Yeah.
they were coming to these events and they were touching and feeling the products. And for a brand that, maybe wasn't carried in Austin, Texas in any stores, or maybe it was just online, it allowed people to touch and feel. And we had this engagement, and people knew that I would not talk about a product or share a product that I wouldn't use myself. And that was really a guideline for me. And so they trusted me.
Hmm.
And, I built this whole brand kind of accidentally around me being pregnant and me sharing my pregnancy experience, which is, that's where it came from.
Yeah. Yeah. And it would be kind of the equivalent of nowadays of like an influencer activation, where
Yeah.
people all come into a place, they all have their own audiences and circles of influence and everything. They all come together and have an event in a physical location with products, because I know the big Procter and Gambles of the world and all these companies do this pretty consistently nowadays. So this was like before all of that. So I can see kind of how that progressed. So let's talk a little bit about the exit and how this progressed into that. How did initial conversations begin, and what was that like?
So I had made my own like internal personal goal that I really wanted to either sell or exit or get an investor by the time I turned 40. So I started it when I turned 30. And, for me, this was a life stage business. I was the face of the brand. And so I felt like as, I got older and as my kids got older, there was a little bit of a disconnect between me talking about strollers and car seats, even though I became an expert in the parenting space, but I wasn't using these products anymore. And it just didn't feel natural as it once did to be telling moms like, yeah, you really need to be pushing the Up a Baby Vista. Like I didn't have a kid in strollers anymore. It was just, you know, so I made that conscious goal that I wanted to exit. I had hired a fractional CFO in 2018 and and I said to her, it was the beginning of 2018, I said, I really want to prepare this business for sale. And I need your help in terms of like getting everything together. I'm not a good numbers person like at all. And admittedly, I've always had help with all of the bookkeeping and the finances, but this was my first like really permanent person in the business. And so she and I started cleaning things up, creating a financial story, and lo and behold, that summer, I actually was reached out to by 3 different entities on LinkedIn, oddly enough. Like I hadn't even like told anyone that I was going to sell the business, but we were making a lot of waves with our Target partnership.
Hmm.
And one of the entities was not a fit and I was kind of like, "No, thank you." One of the entities was the brand who purchased Scary Mommy. And so they reached out to me looking to like acqui-hire me, and they basically wanted to hire me to do what I did for Bump Club for them, and they were going to dissolve my brand. And then the third entity was Advantage Marketing Solutions, who I ended up selling to. And oddly enough, I don't even like respond to a lot of things on LinkedIn. Now I do. But like, it was kind of one of those like weird messages that like you would be like, is that spam? And I thank God I responded. I thought I knew the person, which is why I responded. And I got on a call with a woman from the company and she said to me, we're very interested in your partnership with Target. We work with them in beauty. We can't get into baby with them. We really want to work with them in baby and on our B2B solutions, and they say that they have a partner and it's you. And so like what is your end game? And that really started the conversation, and that was the process. So I actually wasn't even really like prepared because we were preparing at the time. And I actually, with some spider, I just want to mention, like, it wasn't the right opportunity for me. I didn't want an acqui-hire. I didn't want to go work for someone who, it might have been more financially sound, but I didn't want to go work round the clock for someone else in someone else's brand doing what I've done, what I had already done. And, I had a lot of equity in my brand. So it was advantage that I pursued. And it actually was really kind of quick. That was May or June when they reached out, and we closed January 1.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's moving quickly, moving quickly. And how big was the team at that point?
At that point, we had, I think it was like 8 to 10 full-time employees, including myself. And we had a host of contractors. Like my CFO was a part-time fractional
Hmm.
contractor. We had a couple of other contractors. And then I had a team of local moms in about 15 markets that hosted local events for Bump Club. They were part-time contract workers hourly.
Hmm. Got it. And the transaction happens January. What happens afterwards? Does everybody immediately shift over on payroll to the
So it was
company?
actually really interesting because I had to tell my team before the transaction because they wanted everyone on payroll by Jan 1.
Hmm.
So in December, they all always came to Chicago for like an end of the year meeting, and that's when I told them. So I told them that I was selling the company, and a big reason why I went with Advantage, a very big reason, is because they wanted not just me and my brand, but they wanted my team. And I did not want to go anywhere without my team. My team was incredibly important to me. I could not have built Bump Club without them. And knowing what I know now about Advantage, I could not have been there for 2 years without them either. And so I told them in December, we used December to get them on payroll. They were filling out their forms. Everyone accepted their job. We let go one person. That was like a conscious decision that we made.
Hmm.
And then Jan 1, everyone started as an Advantage employee. Like we were ready to go. So that was what happened. And then so we get over to Advantage, and at first we were they're a huge, like, multi-billion dollar, I mean, billions and billions of dollars. They own many agencies. We were their first B2C acquisition. Now, we were B2B and B2C. So that was a big difference too. And I don't think they were really prepared for the B2C part, to be honest. I mean, you have to look at, if you are a business that is B2B to C, you have to look at the B2B in a very different light as B2C. And it was not a great understanding as to how we would continue to acquire customers and what we needed, even though I laid it out during the purchase and the sale process. I mean, there was a very tight plan in place of, this is what I need to grow the business to get to X amount of dollars. And when we first came over, we were like the shiny objects at the company. I mean, they had me like on a tour. I was traveling, meeting a million people. And it was a lot of fanfare and not a lot of like action. And it impacted my first year of business with them. Like it was very, very bumpy. The transition was very, very bumpy. And they wanted to control a lot of our relationships, particularly with Target. And the issue was they bought me for my relationship with Target. So Target didn't want to talk to their people and baby. They wanted to talk to us. And for the first year, we actually didn't even work with Target. And it greatly impacted my bottom line and my revenue and my EBITDA and everything that I needed for my earnout.
Hmm.
So that was kind of the first year. And then we finally got back into graces with Target. I finally convinced them to let us handle it. At the end of 2019, we teed up a huge, like, multi-million dollar program in 300 Target stores, and it was set to start on March 20th of 2020.
Oh.
And we actually like got wind from Target that they were going to pull all in-store activations. It was like at the end of February. It was like before anyone even knew what COVID was.
Hmm.
And I said, I was like, over my dead body, are we losing this revenue? And I went back to Target through Advantage with a very large digital engagement, and they bought it. And we were doing webinars before before March 12th. I will tell you, our first webinar was March 8th. So it was before the lockdown. And they ended up buying this program for even after I left. So I ended up working through 2020, and it was I didn't have to be there, but I wanted to be there. I felt really indebted to my community. I didn't want to leave my community. They looked to me for a lot of things, both my internal and external community. And it really was kind of during the whole COVID process, and just there were just a lot of ways that we were not aligned, Advantage and I. And being the face of a brand, if you're not aligned with what's going on, you don't feel so good about yourself. I mean, I built this company based on me and my morals and values, and all of a sudden I was being asked to compromise on those. And that was when I started the exit process. And that was like a whole other process. So I kind of put the word in my manager's ear at the time in January of 21, and she brushed me off, to be honest. I don't think she believed me. And on Memorial Day of 21, I said, like, no, we need to come up with an exit. And she really kind of kept trying to like brush me off. And in July, I went back to her and I said, well, my last day is going to be on this day, on July 23rd, 2021. And so either we work out something or I'm done. And it was a lengthy process. I mean, it was a really lengthy legal process. um I knew a lot of things that they hadn't extracted from me, including our
Mhm.
Instagram password, and we had at the time like close to 100,000 followers. It was a very big part of our brand. So it was kind of messy. But I ended up leaving. My last official day was July 23rd, 21, and I became a consultant for them for about 10 weeks, and then I left for good.
Nice. It was a bumpy, bumpy as expected. I think you touched on a really important point too about the being used to B2B and then going in and acquiring something that's different and B2C is it sounds like a subtle difference for people listening, but it is like a night and day difference in terms of operations and like everything from marketing to the management organization. So it is a totally different beast altogether. So I'm glad that you mentioned that detail when the acquisition went through, because there's some really good acquirers and then some really bad ones. And
Yes.
not saying that they weren't good, but sometimes it can be unnecessarily bumpy when that happens, just because they're not consistently doing acquisitions, or they're not up to speed. But that sort of gives us a good segue before the finale of the preparedness, like how you got prepared. Obviously, you COVID was crazy and everything. That kind of answers the timing question, I guess, for us. That era of craziness.
Yeah.
What could you share around getting prepared for
When
the
you say
exit?
prepared, are you asking me prepared to exit or prepared to acquire?
Prepared to exit that business? Like, what did you do, and what could you
Okay.
share for tips?
So, oh my god, like a lot of things. It was I would say the one piece of advice that I would give to anyone, and anyone who has their own brand, is to make sure that the brand and the company can function without you and without your face.
Hmm.
And that wasn't the case with Bump Club. And I tried really hard. Like when we were acquired, the plan was to bring other moms who were influencers into the mix so that I wasn't the only face of the brand. And so I really, really was trying to put them in that position, and they like weren't really accepting it.
Mm.
And a little bit they did. Like we had a couple of moms who helped with like some online webinars, but for me personally, I was like, well, I know I'm leaving and I know I'm going to want to do other things. And so I started on Instagram and on social media. I started talking about my personal Instagram and telling people, make sure you're following me over there for more, because I didn't want to lose my community. That was like a very personal thing. In terms of like preparing to exit the business, my whole thing was that I very much wanted it to be wrapped up nicely so that the community so that I didn't just disappear. And that was kind of the big struggle with the company, and why it took so long for me to come to an agreement with them is they literally just wanted me to disappear.
Hmm.
And I said, well, it's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for your relationships with Target and with Nordstrom and all these brands, or with these community members who millions at the time. I mean, 3 million people followed us every month. Like, if I'm just gone, what is what does that say? And so I very much worked with them and tried to get to a place where we were all happy and I could gracefully exit and announce that I was leaving. And that was
Hmm.
a really big thing for me, was making sure that that was in place, and also that my team was taken care of. So, I made sure that my team came over to the acquisition with me, and I wanted to make sure that when I was leaving that they had the tools in place and it was very clear what they needed in order to succeed. Now, did they give them those things? Not really, but at the end of the day, I was not going to just leave and leave them high and dry. Like, those were the things that were very important to me. Um, and just making sure that it wasn't messy, like from an optics point of view. I wanted the brand to survive. I wanted the brand to thrive. It has since gone out of business. They pulled the plug on it, but I didn't want it. I didn't want it to disappear, and I wanted it to be a continued resource for parents. The work that we did was needed and amazing. And I really cared about my legacy in terms of as a founder and as a human being. That was
Hmm.
really important to me. And
Hmm.
so, the legal stuff, like my lawyer and their lawyer worked it out. And honestly, like, there was not much I did besides just making sure things were buttoned up for the company, for my team, and for me. Though
Hmm.
that was my priority. I did not get my full earnout. And I just started talking about that because an NDA went up last year. And so, like, I didn't get my full earnout, and largely because I was not given the resources that were promised to me through the acquisition. And so at the time, I had nothing to lose, you know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
preserving my integrity and making sure that my legacy was intact was my utmost importance, because at that point there was no more financial upside.
Hmm. And I really appreciate and like what you said about the community and the social media component, where you're saying like, "Hey guys, follow me here as well." I think that's such a important ingredient nowadays in
I
the
should have done
era.
it earlier.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the emphasis and value around a community and a brand now are like so connected and so important, that I feel like what you just shared there is such a incredibly valuable tip around, like, if millions of people follow you as the individual, you should probably preemptively prepare for the exit by saying, "Hey, I'm over here too."
Right.
Like, follow me on my personal page is such a great way of sort of preparing. And
Well, and
I
I
haven't heard
also
anybody.
didn't really like, until that moment in time, and really until after I left, like, I didn't look at my personal Instagram, like Lindsay Pinchuk, as anything but like a place to share my kids and like stupid
Hmm.
stuff. And so it was really in that moment that I also started having brand guidelines and guardrails, and being consistent about what I was sharing on Lindsay Pinchuk as well. And then when I moved over, I had a whole shift in content on that page. But I should have looked at that in that light earlier.
Hmm.
And I should have made sure that that page was like a sustainable business even earlier on.
Yeah. But really, I haven't heard anybody say that on the pod before. So that's a great knowledge nugget for everybody. So that takes us to the finale. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell Lindsay 10 years ago?
Um, I would tell Lindsay 10 years ago to trust your gut and to stick with it, because it's, you have to stick with it. I would also tell Lindsay, in terms of preparing for the exit, to make sure that every single thing is in writing. I mean, obviously we know that, and it's really easy to say it, but when you're in it and you're in the negotiation and you really just want to close, you are willing to bend. And I don't regret anything, but I do wish that I would have maybe done a little bit more due diligence into the company and had more in writing in my contract. And it's interesting because full circle here. I said how Scary Mommy was acquired by some spider and some spider wanted to acquire me. And I ended up having Jill Smokler, who was the founder of Scary Mommy, on my podcast not long after I started it. And she gave this very good advice, and I have continued to share it on her behalf, but from me as well. But I mean, she was the one who said it. If you feel like the purchaser is rushing you, like it's not their place to do that. Like it's you can still take a step back. Like don't let them rush you. If they want you, they're going to wait another week or another month or even another year. And so I felt like very pressured, and I didn't want the opportunity to go away, but it wouldn't have gone away. And I wish that I would have just taken a little bit more of a beat. And I would have told myself that. That's what I would
Mm,
have told myself.
great wisdom. So, what are you working on now, and where can people learn more?
Yeah. So thank you. So when I left, my main mission was to help other female founders to not make mistakes like I did and to grow their businesses like I did, which was with zero money. I bootstrapped the whole thing. I never took an investment, and I did so through Marketing Made Simple. And so now I have a consultancy where I work with brands and companies and nonprofits, large and small, and I help them with their simple organic marketing practices. Through that, I've also developed a mentorship called Marketing Made Simple for Small Business, where small business owners meet with me once a week. I have over 100 women in that group, and I teach them how to build and grow and scale their businesses. And then through it all, I launched Dear Found Her, which is my podcast where I share the stories of other female founders. And it started as a podcast, but it's actually turned into like a movement. We now host in real life events, which I said I was never going to do events again after Bump Club. And yet here we are, because events are magic and they really do, instill a connection like no other form of marketing. So I host real in person events, and then I also now have an online community just for Dear Founder. It actually launched this week. It's called the Dear Founder Forum, and it's a place for female founders who are over 40 to connect with each other, ask questions, ask me questions. We have office hours once a month with me. All of my digital resources are there for women who are starting and growing and building their businesses. And there's no gatekeeping. I mean, I'm all about sharing and being very open about the good and the bad and the ugly and all of my resources. And I do really feel that we are better together. And that's the mantra that I want to instill in my community. You can find
Love
me
that.
at Dear Found Her or at Lindsay Pinchuk. And it's www.dearfoundher.com. And the podcast drops every week wherever you podcast.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, wherever you guys are listening on iTunes or Spotify, the links that Lindsay mentioned will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks so much, Steve, for having me. I really appreciate it.